Raiders 2024 season recap. Mike, the Raiders finished 4 and 13. They finished 4 and 13. And really, this is kind of what you expected from the team. You didn't really expect them to be very, competitive, I guess, coming in or for them to be a playoff team. Like, we knew they were talented, but we didn't think they would regress this badly, maybe.
Well, after about week 3 or 4, we expected it. But, I mean, coming into the season, I thought the Raiders were going to be better. I thought they were going to progress, not regress, because on paper, the roster got better.
Well, the reason why I say that is when we had Grant on the show, Grant specifically asked you, he goes, Mike, what were Gardner Minshew?
Yeah.
Gardner Minshew? What are they thinking? And then Grant kept asking, what are they thinking? And I go, tell them what were they thinking, Mike?
Yeah, and I think my response, was, if maybe not specifically to him at that moment, but I know when we talked about like what is going to be the reason that the Raiders can't win this season, it's going to be the quarterbacks. If there was one thing that was on my mind of like, yeah, that's why we're not going to succeed, it's the quarterbacks. But if they do succeed, the offensive coordinator is good, the run game is solid, and they're efficient, and the defense is as good as last year, they should win. But the opposite happened. The quarterbacks were not good. The run game was horrible.
Hot take. The quarterbacks were not the sole reason why the Raiders were bad. I think there's more. It's more to do with the lack of a run game than it is with the quarterback play.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it was coaching, dude. I think it was the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach and the offensive line coach. I think that's what it really came down to, and those were the guys that got fired mid-season. I think it was them. I mean, you mentioned Zamir White. It's funny, at this point, this late in the season, because he's on IR and he got benched, I kind of forgot about Zamir White. I mean, in theory, he was supposed to be good. He was supposed to be the successor to Jacobs, and he just couldn't run the ball. Okay, postseason recap, right? And Alexander Mattison led the team in rushing yards. How many yards do you think he had? Like, usually you want your leading rush to have around 1,000, right?
Yep.
In a great season, oh my God, Saquon, like 2,000 all-purpose yards or whatnot, or rushing, whatever it was. How many yards do you think Alexander Mattison had rushing as the leading rusher of this team?
I feel like he got 600 yards.
420.
Jesus.
He had a 3.2 yard average per carry. Amir Abdullah was behind him with 66 carries. Remember that, 66 carries for 311 yards, 4.7 yard average. Actually really good. Right behind him, Sincere McCormick with 39 carries. The poor guy got hurt. 183 yards, 4.7 yard average. Scott Turner took over, and the run game did get better with the right running backs in place. Zamir White, 66 carries for Amir Abdullah for 311 yards. Zamir White, 65 carries, 183 yards, 2.8 yard average.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I hate to shit on Zamir because I really like Zamir White. But like Tony Brown says here is he feels that Zamir White had bad vision, and he just kind of runs where he's told and got a little lucky at the end of the season the previous year. But I mean, Zamir White is somebody that I just kind of want, like, not because I just drafted him in fantasy, but I wanted to root for him because I thought he was decent, and
yeah.
It's just unfortunate that, I mean, most of his rushes though, Mike, came when the offense was already like could not run the ball. You know what I mean? Like, most of his rushing was at the beginning of the year when they were, at the expense of Luke Getsy,
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think that's part of why Zamir White struggles because that was when Luke Getsy was still the offensive coordinator. Okay,
Mhm.
passing. Gardner Minshew led the team with 2,013 yards. Let's see, 9 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Awesome. Sacked 29 times. Aiden O'Connell, 1,600 yards and 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Solid. Again, offense changed at that point. Receiving, this is where the fun begins. Brock Bowers, 1,194 yards, 112 receptions. He broke all the records on 153 targets. Like, honestly, thank God they traded Devontae, man. This was fun, you know? And then, honestly, and he had 5 touchdowns. One person that I really wanted to talk about as far as the end of season recap is Jacoby Myers. I saw going into this Charger game that he had like around 900 yards receiving on the season, and I was like, man, they should get him 1,000 this Sunday, and they did, you know. And everybody was all hyped about it and stuff. It was his first season getting 1,000 yards. I remember back early on in his Patriots career, he struggled getting in the end zone, kind of like Trey McBride this year. Like it was kind of a joke, you know.
Mhm.
Um, Jacoby Myers is the type of player that the Raiders need to keep around for a multitude of reasons. He's sure-handed, great route runner. He also just plays with a chip on his shoulder while also not being a diva. He's not your typical diva receiver. He's very humble and he loves to block. He loves to get in there. He'll crack a defensive end. He does not care. Dude is a stud. I think because he was an undrafted free agent and right now he's a Raider and before he was on the shitty Patriots teams, he hasn't ever really gotten like the major respect I think he deserves. Do I think he's a true number one in this league? Not necessarily, but I think he can be. I think he's a top 32 wide receiver in the league. I think that's fair. Um, Granted, I think he's the perfect second wide receiver for an offense. And if you want to consider Bowers the top receiver, I'm fine with Myers as the second receiver. I'm just not quite fine with Trey Tucker as the third. I need somebody else in this offense receiving, right? Preferably an athletic guy who's probably your number one. Jacoby Myers being like the Michael Crabtree sure-handed guy, right? Go get your Amari Cooper. Plus you have Brock Bowers, and it's just like, God damn, put a quarterback in there. Have fun, you know? And then defensively, Robert Spillane led the team in total tackles. Shocker, 158, 2 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 7 passes defended, 2 INTs. Great season. Upcoming free agent. I think he is, depending on the defensive coordinator for this team, I think he's one of the. There are a lot of free agents this year, especially on defense. He's one of the few guys that it's like, you should really re sign him. He's great for this locker room, for this team, for this defense. And I don't think you're going to find many linebackers like him in free agency. Trevon Merrick right behind him, 104 tackles, 1 sack, 5 tackles for loss, 10 passes defended, 2 interceptions. Really, really good season from him. Another guy that I feel you should really re-sign him. I would even argue he's a must-keep. Trevon Merrick at free safety. Right behind him, Isaiah Polamau. I'm going to stop there as far as the tackles. But Isaiah Polamau was not the starter to start the season. He had 89 tackles. If he was the starter the entire season, he's probably the second leading tackler, and he probably has way more impressive stats. 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, 5 passes defended. I think Isaiah Polamau is a stud, and I think he's proven that he deserves to be the starting safety opposite Trevon Merrick on this defense. It's just a matter of, obviously, does Tom Telesco believe that, but also who the coach is that they bring in for defense. Do they agree with that? Do they feel that they fit? The positive with Polamau is he's a restricted free agent, so he's pretty easy to bring back. So Trevon Merrick is the guy, and Spillane, where I'm like, man, I'd really like to see them back. Adam Butler, another solid year. Nate Hobbs, another injury-plagued year. I'd love to keep him, but man, the consistent 6 weeks of missing football from him. I'd love to keep him, but man, I Tyler mentioned in our group chat that Asante Samuel Jr. is going to be a free agent. Tom Telesco drafted him. He's coming off of an injured reserve stint, I believe. But, if you want to replace Nate Hobbs, maybe Asante Samuel Jr. is your type of guy. A guy that might hopefully stay on the field more. Obviously, Max Crosby with the injury-plagued season, only 7.5 sacks. But for many weeks, including the weeks that he was out on IR, he was leading the league in tackles for loss. Just usual Max Crosby shit, right? Tyree Wilson at times seemingly progressed, but I wouldn't say that he had a super successful season. 4.5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss. And then at some point this season, we got Kayvon Chase on. Where is he? There he is. 7 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 32 tackles. That's a guy that I'd love to get back as a depth defensive end for this roster. And a guy who didn't play at all this season, Malcolm Kuntz. I think he's a must re-sign. In part because of his injury, you might be able to actually get him at a discount on a prove-it deal, something. Get him back. Keep him opposite Crosby. You got Christian Wilkins on the interior. This defense can be a lot better next year if it's just healthy. You lost Marcus Epps. You lost Nate Hobbs at points this year. Later in the season, you lost a guy who I'm really, really beginning to feel is an up-and-coming corner in this league, and Jacorian Bennett. Just a lot of losses on this defense, so injury-wise, And that's definitely one of the big stories from this season, other than just losing as much as they did. Those are the major things I'd say from a season recap,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was there anything else that you did want to mention before? Actually, there is something I did want to bring up, and while we're recapping, the season, right? I wanted to sort of go over all of our predictions and go over what our expectations were for the team, kind of heading in. So the expectations that we had, and this was back in August. So I said that the floor for the Raiders was 5-12. They were just short of that floor. They were 4-13. My prediction was 8-9. So I guess they were 8-9 the season prior, and then they regressed. So Mike, you had a slightly higher floor, and you had a slightly higher. Well, you were really kind of in between. You were 8.5 wins.
Yeah. I felt the quarterbacks are going to bring them down, but everything else is going to be better. So I just figured 500.
Mm-hmm. But as time went on, so we saw in May, we had higher expectations for the team. And as time went on, our expectations just got a little bit lower. So
yeah, probably because of the quarterback.
That's really kind of how it went for the Raiders this year. So week 1, at the Chargers, I had a good feeling that the Chargers were going to win, because I really felt good about Jim Harbaugh. Mike picked, the Raiders. At the Ravens, everybody except for my girlfriend's dad thought that the Ravens were going to win. And so Mike and Pia's dad, they bet a bottle of margarita mix on it. And that margarita mix was hella good, Mike.
It sure was.
It was hella good. So Panthers, how did the Raiders lose to the Panthers, Mike? The Panthers were so bad at the time.
That was the week they brought in Andy Dalton. He just torched the defense.
Yeah. Man. All right. Versus the Browns, we thought the Browns were going to win, and the Raiders. I mean, it was so hard to predict the Raiders early on, and you can kind of see it on both ends. We just didn't know what to make of this team. And then I thought, if they could beat the Browns, they could beat the Broncos, but the Broncos were better than anybody thought at that point. But, Mike was pretty sure that the Broncos defense was going to be able to, stop the Raiders. And then, all right, Steelers were going to win. They were doing really good at the time. The Raiders played at the Rams, and, I don't know why I didn't have high faith in the Rams at that point, and I thought maybe the Raiders were going to surprise us with a win and, start winning. And then, so we kind of I think Mike hit a point where he was just going to pick every single team against the Raiders,
The Jaguars. Yeah. At some point, I don't know if it was the Bengals, Chiefs, Rams, Steelers, or Broncos games, but one of those games, we had a pod, and I said they probably won't win another game until they face the Jaguars. I literally said that, and that's exactly what happened.
So really, the expectations really plummeted after, like Mike said earlier, 4 weeks. It was like 4 weeks. It was, you know what? The Raiders might not win another game this year.
Yeah. I think the Broncos and Steelers probably going into the bye was yeah, we're done. But even before that, like losing to the fucking Panthers, it was just like, oh boy. So, Yep.
Raiders lost to the Chiefs. That was the one where the Raiders could have won, right? Or was that the one in Kansas City?
At Chiefs, yeah, at Chiefs.
Okay. Yeah, they got kind of crushed a little bit in this one, I think. So at the Bengals, I mean, the Raiders also didn't catch a break with their schedule. Like this was a pretty rough stretch, in retrospect. Then at the Dolphins, which is a winnable game, but the Dolphins were the better team. Broncos, another tough matchup for the Raiders. Chiefs, another tough matchup. Buccaneers, another tough matchup. Even the Falcons. All right, the Falcons were struggling at the time with Kirk Cousins, but it was a winnable game. But Raiders did not pull that one out. And then Mike expected the Raider. This was the only Raider prediction since week 3. And Mike, I mean, to Mike's credit, he got it right. And, I thought maybe, I was feeling the Mac Jones magic a little bit. I thought maybe Mac Jones could put together another performance, feed Evan Engram, feed Brian Thomas Jr. But the Raiders hurt their draft stock. This was like the first of the 2 weeks. Like this is where they relinquished their first overall pick. And then they did it again against the Saints. And that's where Mike kind of flip-flopped. That's what I didn't understand. But I think Mike wanted to believe that the Saints were going to win.
Yeah, that was the one prediction this year where I was like, I'm just praying that I'm right, but I don't think I'm going to be. What it was, I had that hot streak of, let's just say it was 10 straight weeks of getting it right, maybe even more. I was like, can I please be right again? And the Saints beat us. I was just trying to keep the vibes going.
Yeah. So, I mean, really the rest is history. Like you can kind of see where our predictions were the entire season. We didn't predict the Raiders to win a lot of games after, outside of those first couple weeks. And then so in terms of week to week predictions, Mike barely, he got one more than I did for our Raider picks this year. Before the season, our expectations were very, very high for the Raiders. This was back in May of last year. So
FP?
Okay.
FP.
Yeah. I just narrowly, I mean, we had more incorrect predictions than correct predictions at the end of the year. The expectations definitely got lowered,
Yeah. It's hard to predict a season preseason, especially with all these high hopes. Again, on paper, the team looked better. The quarterback situation was worse last year, arguably, and they won games with Antonio Pierce, and then they regressed, yada, 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 So that's 2024 Raiders season for you.
Yeah. Tony Brown says 420. Oh my God, that's nasty work. Unless you're Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, or Wiz Khalifa.
Yeah. Jonathan Martinez says, I felt so bipolar, with the rematch of the Chiefs versus Raiders. Daniel Carlson missed 3 field goals. Depression. It was better for the Raiders that they
at
missed the
that
field
point, I
goals.
was just rooting for the first pick, so I didn't even give a shit. If this were a meaningful season, that would have sent me through a wall.
Mm-hmm. Tony says, yes, I love Myers also. What do you think about pairing him with T. Higgins?
Man, I mean, they have the money for it, The only thing is, T. Higgins is a guy who does not play full seasons, and like, would it be better for the team to sign T. Higgins, who I do think is a top end wide receiver? Like on most teams, he's number one. Kind of like a Devontae Smith. I would, anyways. It would probably be.
If you can get T. Higgins on a discount, it actually, sorry to cut you off. It might be a good, all right. The thing is, with free agency, you're never going to get guys, on discounts.
Yeah,
you have to overpay. But like in a perfect world, if you could get T. Higgins on a team friendly deal for the Raiders, which isn't going to happen, it would be perfect, because if he does miss time, you just got finished saying that Jakobi Meyers he can be a number 1 in your opinion, but is sort of the perfect number 2 wide receiver.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be awesome if they also get the quarterback. Like, okay, one way that you can make it make sense is you sign him, you have the money to pay for him, and then somehow you do get the quarterback in this draft, whether somebody falls to 6 or you trade up, which I'm not the biggest fan of because it involves more first round picks later getting sent. But in that case, it's like this offseason coming in, like Caleb Williams was set up with all those wide receivers and, blah, 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 blah. They got a running back, and it looked like, wow, they're really set up. Their offensive line still sucked. He was like the most sacked quarterback, that's a big part of it. It wouldn't be worth it to me if you don't have the quarterback, essentially. And the only thing that makes it make sense to me, like I said, is drafting the quarterback, or just instead of going McMillan 6th overall, or even a wide receiver 2nd round, 3rd round, you can spend the money for the wide receiver and then draft best player available, 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round, non-receivers. That works for me. And that's a lot of fun, but man, I think the advantage of the Raiders is they don't have state income tax.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, you don't have to overpay, because they'll be paying more to him already because he's not getting taxed to high hell. But still, he's going to want to probably reset the market. So it's going to be a hefty price tag, whoever signs him.
Mm-hmm. Greg Lira says, Tom Telesco set AP up to fail. Now, I do appreciate this perspective. I want to ask you, why do you feel that way? I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm not saying that you're exactly right either.
I wouldn't say that he's wrong.
I want to know why you feel that way.
I wouldn't say that he's wrong. I would just say, I said it kind of earlier, of like it was situational for AP, both in that he had a shitty situation at quarterback, but also for the season, for this offseason, the situation was shitty for the Raiders to get a quarterback. Because of the draft spot at 13, they couldn't get a top-end guy. And then in free agency, it's like nobody really special was out there. Maybe Baker was a free agent, which I could be wrong on that, but I don't actually – no, well, I don't remember. But he would have – in theory, he'd be the best one if he was a free agent, right? But who else was out there? Russell Wilson. You could have got him for $1 million. That's the best argument to me of like, wow, they really missed that. Like, you could have got him for a fucking steal of a deal. $1.6 million. The Broncos are paying his contract, and he's playing quarterback, and maybe Devontae's happy, yada, 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 right? Yeah, you can argue that. But again, if anything, and I think Antonio Pierce was a part of this, because at least he said that one of the reasons why he liked Gardner Minshew is because he beat the Raiders last year, which I was like, okay. A lot of quarterbacks beat the Raiders last year. But you could argue that their free agent, man, we'd have to look at a list of the 2023 free agent quarterbacks. If you could pull that up right now, we're waiting for his comment. That'd be awesome. Just really quick. I'd say the best way I could put it is that Tom Telesco and company's assessment of the free agent quarterbacks is what set AP up to fail. Other than that, it was the Raiders situation. It was the fact that they beat the Broncos at the end of 2023, and that put them above the Broncos in the draft, so they couldn't get a quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
situational.
Let me share my screen here so that way, you can. All right, 2023. All right, so Lamar Jackson was not going to hit free agency. Geno Smith didn't, he re-signed with the Seahawks. There was Derek Carr, who signed with the Saints.
Obviously, we're not signing him. Sorry, go to 1 and 2.
Am I looking at the right year, or is this the year prior? Because Jimmy Garoppolo...
this is the year prior, because Derek Carr wouldn't have been on the Raiders the previous year.
Yeah, no, okay. I'm looking at the wrong year. So I need to look at 2024.
Yes, free agency. Sorry. Yeah. I'm still confused because it's just January fucking 7th of 2025. So I'm thinking we're still in 2024 season, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, look at... All right. Like I said, we need to acknowledge when we're wrong, and it's always Mike. It's always Mike. Okay. Let me see if this is a good source. All right. Right here, I'm pulling it up. Okay. Oh, disable my ad blocker. Okay. No, thank you. All right, Kirk Cousins. There was no way the Raiders were going to sign him to that deal, and the Raiders did the good thing of not signing him to that deal. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Baker Mayfield. The Buccaneers were going to... I mean, they re-signed him. So I think they had full-on, first hand with that. How outdated is this website? Oh my God. Jacoby Brissett. I didn't even know. Okay. He signed with the Patriots. Joe Flacco signed with the Colts. Tyrod Taylor, with the Jets. So Joe Flacco was the interesting option, but he was not good with the Colts this year. He was only good with the Browns. Ryan Tannehill, I don't even think he signed anywhere. That could have been an interesting name to take a look at. Josh Dobbs could have been interesting for the Raiders. Jameis Winston would have been interesting for the Raiders.
Right. But, comparing Dobbs and Winston and even fucking, I guess, Flacco, Gardner Minshew actually was, starting games and, winning games. It kind of does make sense comparing most of these quarterbacks. Russell Wilson and Baker is where I'm like, yeah, you made the wrong decision, but Baker wasn't going to go anywhere else. I'm sure he wanted to go back to the Bucs.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of options.
Go back to the top.
Oh, yep. Sorry.
You're good. I'm just trying to think of the top again. I mean, Jacoby Brissett. That's bridge quarterback 101, and they probably realized that they weren't going to be getting a quarterback in the draft. So why get a bridge quarterback who's super old and not really the type that's going to start a full season? Whereas Gardner Minshew, it's well, we've seen him succeed, I understood the thinking. And Joe Flacco, 39 years old, really? Yeah, he played great for the Browns, but Tyrod Taylor, not a starter. Tannehill, fuck no. Dobbs, not a starter. Sorry. Jameis Winston, interesting, but at this point in his career, he's not a starter. At least not recently.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really blame them. I really don't. Especially considering it was only around $10 million per year. It's like, it could have been worse financially.
Yeah. Tony says the quarterback and offensive coordinator, of course. I do like AP, but I agree with you guys. We need a coach with experience and who calls plays also.
Yeah.
Like it's not so much that the coach needs to call plays, but it needs to be the coach's offensive system.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if they can get a coordinator who calls the plays that the coach designs, that would be ideal. Greg says AP was told he wanted Aiden O'Connell as the starter, but he had a lot of front office naysayers. I don't know if that's exactly, accurate, but if you can send an article, to our Twitter account, it's at silver_gold_pod. I'll definitely take a look at it. I'd be interested to see it. All in the coffin, or all in till the coffin says, to be honest, send Mad Max in a trade package for the first overall pick and keep our 6th overall as well. No. There's no quarterback in this draft, in my opinion, who's going to be worth Max Crosby. Maybe next year to get Arch Manning, but not this year.
Yeah, I don't know why earlier today I was driving at work and I had this on like thought of like, could they trade Crosby maybe in a year? Man, I mean, and the thinking is you get future picks and you utilize that to move up for the quarterback next year, and then you hope for like a Malcolm Kuntz, and maybe you draft the edge defender 6th overall this year, and you also have Tyree Wilson. Like, just hope that 2 of those guys can just be bona fide starters. Obviously, your defense can be a little bit worse, but hey, man, if you can make it work right and get the quarterback, that's worth more to the team if you get the right quarterback. But if I'm a GM, I'm not trading him.
Yeah. Only if you have a sure thing at quarterback. But none of these quarterbacks are going to be a sure thing. Even Arch Manning isn't necessarily a sure thing, but he's just the hot name that's like looming in the next couple of years. Similar to
imagine a Manning and Brady duo. Brady training a Manning. Like that's crazy.
The Raiders are going to become the Rocky movies of the NFL because Brady beat a Manning a couple times in the playoffs and then lost to both the Mannings, and Rocky and Apollo Creed. It's all coming full circle. Jonathan Martinez, what's the most painful injury that you've seen this season in the NFL? I'd say there are a couple painful ones that I've seen. I would say Tua's concussion did not look very fun. That was scary. There was easily Tank Dell's injury.
Oh yeah, I agree. In slow motion, that shit was nuts. Not good.
Yeah, I hope he's okay. I was thinking Brandon Ayuk, but no, Tank Dell's was worse. Greg says Luke Getsy and Tom Telesco both argue to start Minshew based off of paying him for $15 million.
I'm sure Getsy probably was vying for Minshew simply because he had a better sense of the offense in theory. That makes sense to me. I think that's probably got a lot of merit to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Antonio Pierce will leak out what truly happened within time. I believe he will. I do believe that more is going to come out later on. But
if he's on a podcast, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan Martinez says, never trade Max. He's the heart and soul of the defense. he is the heart and soul of the Raiders defense. And I'd say only trade him if you are for sure going to get a franchise quarterback.
Yeah.